Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, we have a big show today. What about this? The federal government shutdown. The credit unions are offering special programs. And then imagine this. We're going to take you into the operating room. An important health care update. But first, John Micek joins us. We're going to talk about, hey, what's next for state government? Let's do it.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Well, imagine this. John Micek is sitting across from me. He's been on the program for many years. He's, for the next couple of hours anyway, he's the editorial page editor of the Harrisburg Patriot News Penn Live. But probably when this airs, you're going to have a new gig, buddy.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
All right. So as we sit here on a Thursday morning taping the big show, I am still Penn Live's opinion editor with a job I've had for the last 6 years. Starting Tuesday, I'll be editor-in-chief of a new venture called the Pennsylvania Capital Star.
Pennsylvania Capital Star.
Capital-Star. If you guys want to put that up on the Chiron, it's http://penn-capital-star.com. An all-news website. We're doing breaking news, deep dives, contributed commentary, staff-written commentary. The commentary will be from the decidedly progressive point of view.
And you're going to cover a lot of state government.
We're going 100% state government campaigns, top to toe. Assembled a really great staff of hungry and aggressive journalists, and I am looking forward to getting that adventure off the ground.
Fabulous, and of course you're welcome on the program, so you'll come back and help us understand. Talking about state government,
yes.
Governor Wolf gave a very brief 16-minute inaugural address. It was, I think, well-timed. It was optimistic. But it had a sense of realism. He got into Pennsylvania history and tied our past to the present, talked about special relationships and trust. Having said all of that,
yes.
What's he going to do? He's got to have an agenda.
My colleague Jan Murphy, I think, called him the encourager-in-chief on Tuesday morning, saying that he wants Pennsylvanians to have faith in themselves and faith in the government. It's a really interesting way of turning the speech around, Terry. He put it back on the voters in a lot of ways to take control of state government, to make their voices heard, challenging them to rise to these challenging times. That said, you and I both know that second-term governors have a finite window to get their programs done. 18 to 24 months probably at most for Governor Wolf before it's diminishing returns.
You're exactly right.
And the lame duck phase of his administration sets in. I think we can expect a few big things from him.
Okay, let's talk about it. What, minimum wage hike?
Absolutely. On January 1st, the minimum wage in 20 states went up. Workers got a raise. There's a higher minimum wage in all of our surrounding states.
Pennsylvania, $7.25 per hour. That's the federal minimum. That's the state minimum too.
And it's been there for a decade.
Yeah,
it hasn't moved. There has been significant pushback from Republicans in the General Assembly. Your friends and sponsors in the business community have also pushed back. Gene Barr from the Pennsylvania Chamber, for instance. But it's easy to see that becoming a part of budget discussions this year, and I think something that the governor is going to push for very hard. It seems, it's one of these things where the idea that its time has finally come. We'll have that discussion. We'll have that discussion about whether or not to legalize recreational marijuana.
That's popular with the voters, but not with particularly the Republicans in the General Assembly. I'm not being critical of Republicans. I'm merely pointing out that overall there are fewer of them in favor of it than Democrats. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is another thing where it seems a matter of when, but rather than if. Other states are moving in that direction.
New Jersey and New York in particular, bordering states.
Exactly right. The governor had been opposed to legalizing it. Post-elections, amazing what a significant re-election win can do for one's spinal fortitude. But he said it was time for the state to have this discussion. Not actually put a bill in mind, but actually begin having the discussion and looking at what surrounding states are doing and the impacts there.
And the severance tax.
Well, before we move on from that, I mean, legalizing recreational marijuana could be a significant revenue raiser. That's important because the state is staring down the barrel, according to the Independent Fiscal Office, of a $1.5 billion to $1.7 billion deficit in the coming fiscal year. You won't get all of the money from recreational marijuana in the first year, but if they get 200 or 250 million, say, from that in the first 6 months of the fiscal year, that might be something.
Now, in every single budget address, the governor has pushed for a severance tax. That's a tax on the amount of natural gas that cubic feet that gets extracted from the fracked wells. And undoubtedly, he's going to come back with that.
No, that's Tom Wolf's white whale. He will hunt it to perdition's flames. I mean, he promised that in 2014 when he was first elected. He came real close, Terry. You'll recall in 2017 when the Senate Republicans included that in a revenue package. Right. It went over to the House. Got gussied up with so many toxic amendments that it disappeared without a trace. But you can expect, I mean, again, that's $250 million. All
right, before I let you go, John, all we heard about was 6'8" John Fetterman, who wears cargo pants and shorts and all these other things. And the relationship between the new lieutenant governor and the governor seems quite strong, despite the fact that Fetterman is far more, quote, progressive, end quote, than the governor. How's that going to work out?
I think Tom Wolf is going to have a very interesting and aggressive advocate in John Fetterman. I think we're also going to finally move past the goth lieutenant governor trope and see how he actually governs on the ground. This is a guy, though, Terry, who comes to the table as he's characterized himself as a social worker who kind of fumbled his way into politics. Very active in his hometown of Braddock, Pennsylvania, helping to reinvigorate the town. His wife Giselle is very active in causes. He might be running point on recreational marijuana. He'll chair the pardons board. Also, I mean, traditionally, you and I both know that the lieutenant governor's office is a job where political ambitions usually go to die.
Yeah, that's correct.
Fetterman, I think, though, has his eyes on something bigger 4 years hence, so he might be the guy who breaks that curse.
There you go. Look, thanks for coming on. You're always welcome. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
You bet.
All right, coming up, the shutdown. Credit unions are offering special programs to federal employees affected by the shutdown. We'll get to that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Well, we're in the midst of a federal shutdown. I think everybody knows that. What does it mean? The credit unions are offering special programs. Joining me to talk about that is Patrick Conway. He's the president and CEO of the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, and Amey Sgrignoli. She's at Belco Community Credit Union. So I guess I'll start with you, Pat. Federal government shutdown. We know nationally its impact. But in our state, it's having a pretty significant. The longer it goes on, tell me if I'm right, the more people that seem to be affected.
That's true. That's true.
Talk about this.
800,000 people are impacted.
Yeah.
Over 60,000 in Pennsylvania, and that's just the federal employees. Then you've got all the federal contractors that are impacted as well. So there's a lot of people impacted, and so what our credit unions are doing are, trying to extend a helping hand at this difficult time.
Yeah, and talk about that. I mean, what is it that you can do to help people? Many of these workers are not being paid, right? Some have just been laid off. Now, we hope they all get paid. I have not talked to anyone, Democrat or Republican, who don't think they need to be paid. Go ahead.
Sure. So, as you know, our credit union philosophy is people helping people. And our programs, and I've talked to credit unions across the state, so every credit union has a little bit different program that they're offering, but really what we're focusing to is minimizing or removing any kinds of fees that individuals who are affected by this would need to pay. Mm-hmm. We're also looking at skip-a-pay options on loan payments, looking for ways to provide them with low-cost or no-cost loans during this time period, and really just individually, case by case, sitting down, having a conversation with people about how we can help them reprioritize and
so if they have a loan and they're having trouble paying it, you may, wait, say, well, come back in a couple of weeks after you. Is that? I mean, I want to put it in terms that everybody
Sure.
understands. Go ahead.
Well, the skip-a-pay option would give them the ability to miss a payment without having any negative impact to a credit score, and there wouldn't be any fee involved in doing that skip-a-payment for them.
Yeah. Same, I mean, there's things like you have here 0% APR interest, whatever that means, signature relief on the, what's that mean?
Well, these are all ways that we can sort of bridge the gap. You know, we know that federal employees are going to be paid eventually, but many families are paycheck to paycheck. So we're looking for ways, credit unions are, and many businesses are, frankly, that we can sort of bridge the gap and extend that help.
Yeah. But here's something else that I think is very important that you're going to do is you're willing to sit down and chat with people about their financial situation, both in the short term, I presume, and the long term, and offer, I'll put it this way, counseling in terms of how they're to work this situation out now, but also, you know, the future, right?
Sure, sure. So giving us a call and talking to us helps us to be able to better understand what your situation is and help you to rebudget or reprioritize. But a signature loan is really an easy way to come in and get
What's that?
It's a loan with no collateral, so it's a short-term loan. You can come in, you don't need to provide collateral, you get qualified for it, and it's a low payment for you, and even deferred payment options are available as well.
And the other aspect of this, Pat, which I think is which is important, is with each passing week, the number of people affected. Remember, there's folks who rely, even if they don't work for the federal government, but they rely on the services that are being curtailed. And so if you're a farmer, you're not getting payments, agricultural subsidies. If you're in construction, roads and bridges, some states get 75–80% of their road and bridge. At some point, you're going to be seeing those employees coming into your offices, right?
That's right. You know, the longer that the partial shutdown stretches on, the more difficulty that's created for more people. So credit unions, like a lot of businesses, are trying to find ways to help, all across the board.
Yeah. There's another aspect of this. Long term, this should be an incentive for people to sit down, and I'm sure you'll talk to folks about, look, you need a saving. You want to call it a rainy day fund. I don't care what it doesn't matter what you call it. It's all about running. Talk about that.
So savings habits, it's really hard to develop good savings habits, but we try to make it as easy as we can at the credit union. We'll start out with as low as $5 on up to whatever you think you can afford, but we utilize things like club accounts. So you've heard about the accounts where you can come in and make a small deposit every pay to save for the holiday, but you can also make those club accounts for vacation, for your rainy day fund, for an emergency fund, taxes and insurance. So just finding ways to help people to save incrementally so they view that as part of the overall budget and they don't get caught short when an emergency comes up.
Yeah, and the fact is that more than 25% of Americans, Pennsylvanians, don't do don't do anything, right?
Unfortunately, that's the case. And credit unions really are the financial partner of their members, so they're counseling them on their financial health and well-being as part of what they do. But many families are paycheck to paycheck and really aren't saving in that.
What I like about this discussion is we're not only talking about what you all can do to help them in the short run, but the bigger goal is to get a plan for when tough times come. It may not just be this. You could get laid off. Your job, could be curtailed. You go ahead.
You want to lay the groundwork in the good times. So if you can get people to come in and talk to you about lines of credit and creating savings habits when things are going well, it positions them to be ready for when these types of things happen.
All right. Thanks for coming in. You'll come in and keep us updated on this. All right. Guess what? You won't believe this. We're going to take you into the operating room. Well, how about figuratively?
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Association of Pennsylvania State College and University Faculties, representing the faculty and coaches who are devoted to providing quality public higher education for Pennsylvania's college students.
Well, as I said earlier, we're going to take you into the operating room. We have the president, if you will, of the Pennsylvania Association of Nurse Anesthetists. Did I get that right?
You got that right. Very good.
Boy, I'll tell you, that's not easy. Do people trip over that all the time?
I trip over it all the time, including myself. It's not an easy word to say.
All right, before we get into some other aspects of our conversation, what do you do?
Well, I'll tell you, I come here today with 25 years experience as a registered nurse. I've worked in intensive care units really across the state, and I was a flight nurse for a while, but for the past 13 years...
You were a what?
I was a flight nurse.
What's a flight nurse?
Worked on a helicopter. So if you crash your car on the side of the road, I was the guy that picked you up and took you to the hospital.
So you saved lives. I'll be blunt.
Saved lives, absolutely.
Go ahead.
So for the past 13 years, though, I've worked for a great healthcare system, and I've worked as part of an anesthesia team in a very dynamic, really a great level 1 trauma center. I've worked as a CRNA, something I'm very, very passionate about.
Now you got to help me out.
Yeah, right. Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist. CRNA for short, we're nurse anesthetist. We provide, across the country, we're providing about 45 million anesthetics annually across the United States, and we can work in any area where a surgery or anesthetic would be provided. Yeah. We work in conjunction with an anesthesiologist, a surgeon, a proceduralist, to manage. So
you all work together.
Care. We all work together
in harmony, right?
In harmony. I would be with you both. Before, during, and after surgery. We're with you in the operating room. After the operating room, we would be with you to make sure that you are safe, primarily, comfortable, and as pain-free as possible.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. As I indicated before, you go into the operating room. There's some of these things. And many of I've had surgery. I don't know if you have. I'm sure many of our viewers haven't. We often go into these things. We're a little bit like this.
Very much so.
So you've seen that, right?
I have seen that.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
And if you don't come into the operating room a little bit nervous, that makes me nervous, because that means you've been there way more than necessary. So a little bit of nervousness is okay. That's why I'm there. Yeah. I'm there to make sure that you're, again, safe and comfortable.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine. It's hard to even think about this without having a clear understanding of how important that aspect of the surgery is. And it's not just I shouldn't joke about it, but I'd say when I would go in for surgery, well, you can put me to sleep, make sure you wake me up, but go ahead. So.
Well, right. It's definitely arts and sciences, putting somebody to sleep and getting them safely through the anesthetic care.
Yeah. All right. I want to run to a break. When we come back, I know that you have some issues in state government that I want to talk with you about and the importance of them and where they will all go. We'll do that, and we'll be back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society, inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine, and by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care.
Dereck Record joins me. He's the president of the Pennsylvania Association of Nurse. Help me out.
Nurse Anesthetists.
Anesthetists. That's not easy. All right, you folks have some issues that you want resolved that are before the Pennsylvania legislature, correct?
Currently not before the legislature, but one of our problems that we're having right now is with title designation. In the state of Pennsylvania, as an advanced practice nurse, a nurse anesthetist doesn't have title designation. Our name doesn't appear in any regulation or statute, so to speak.
Really?
Other advanced practice nurses, nurse practitioners, clinical nurse specialists, and nurse midwives all have their designation.
Tell me why that's important.
Why is that important? It's extremely important. A lot of people might think that it's simply just a name on a piece of paper, but it actually provides some of our membership with some huge benefits. With this title designation, it would generate a license. And with that license, some of our membership are having difficulty with things like disaster relief. With the hurricanes that have plagued our southern borders in our southern states.
So does this ensure your credibility? Is it about that aspect?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily credibility,
but I meant with the public.
But
go ahead.
Because of different credentialing processes with each state, every state is different.
Right.
It's not easy to pick up your license from one state and go to another if you don't have one.
I get it.
So other states don't know what to do with somebody from Pennsylvania. So with those disaster relief.
So it certifies your credentials. Is that a way to put it?
That is correct. That's a good way to put it.
Well, no, but that's important.
Yes, it is. Very important.
So does the legislature have to do this?
The legislature has to do this. We're going to work with some legislators to try to get this across the goal line. Have you ever heard the term silver tsunami?
No.
With the silver tsunami, it's the graying of America as the population ages.
I should know that. I should know that.
Myself included. As the population ages a little bit, we have more and more people consuming healthcare resources.
Yeah.
So we need as many people in the battle to try to take care of those people.
So let me ask this question. Do you have a surplus now, or is it a fact that you're going to be concerned about people coming along and going into your profession, which
we're concerned. We're a little bit of both. What we actually want to do is we want to make Pennsylvania a very attractive state to work in. Right now we have 13 nurse anesthesia programs. We're a national draw with nurse anesthetists and students coming into the state.
Right.
We want to actually keep those people here
in the state
to care for Pennsylvanians.
Yeah.
But unfortunately,
and young people are leaving the state, by the way, go ahead.
Right, we want to have a brain gain, not a brain drain.
Yeah.
We want to keep those people here, and we want to make Pennsylvania attractive to people to work here so that they can stay and care for Pennsylvania.
What I find fascinating is that this is one of those things that we often don't talk about, that we go through blithely through life without even thinking about. We go to the hospital and we get some surgery or wherever we're going to get it. And for the moment, it's on our minds, but in reality, it's not something that we pay much attention to. And so what you've done is highlighted that. So what kind of educational background do you need to become?
Education for a CRNA, Certified Registered Nurse Anesthetist, isn't necessarily an easy thing to do. You start with a 4-year bachelor's degree. You have to work as a registered nurse in an intensive care setting for at least a year.
Right.
The average has about 3 years of experience before getting in and being admitted into an anesthesia school. Mm-hmm. Once you're in anesthesia school, you amass an incredible amount of training necessary. Once you graduate, you have to take a national certifying exam. And then in order to practice, you have to be board certified.
Look, I want to thank you. This, I think, is an important update. You'll come back and keep us posted. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.